Welcome everyone to This is Youth Work, the podcast that delves into the lives of youth workers, their journeys and their work with young people. And today I'm joined by Emma, Caroline and Matt, all from different ends of the youth work spectrum. So welcome everyone. We all okay?
Yep, thank
Yeah,
you.
all good.
Good.
Everything.
And it's a sunny Friday for me down in Newport. Obviously, Matt, you're over in Flintshire. How's the weather down there?
Yeah, sunny now. Thank you.
Is it down there or up there, I suppose, isn't it? And down
Yeah,
in the
well,
valleys, how's things in Blind Gwent, Caroline?
Well, I can see blue sky, so that's good.
Well, that's good. And how's things in Talbot Green, Em? Is it
Yeah,
blue skies with you too?
yeah, Talbot Green's lovely, but I'm in a little room with no windows in, so I can't see it. So it's not
Same
good.
here. Same here. Oh, I got one small window, like a prison. I'm not in prison, by the way. I am a free man. So obviously today's a leadership special, but obviously it'd be really good to understand you as a person, the journeys that you've got from. You can start far back as birth, if you like, however you want to, and what got you to this position. So some people like talking about, what influenced them to get into youth work, and then quickly as a leader, stroke manager. So yeah, go back as far back as you like. Everyone knows my backstory, so I'll skip my turn if that's okay. But it'd be really good to get a bit of context to see who we're listening to. Matt, can I start with you, and then I'll go to Caroline, then Emma, if that's okay. So over to you, Matt.
yeah, sure. So I got into sports coaching through the degree that I did in Manchester. Then started picking up part-time work in the summer holidays, working in on play schemes. So I was kind of got involved in the play world because that was paying, and then the sports coaching was
Yeah.
generally voluntary. But then quite quickly, I got into supervisory roles on those community play schemes. So those were kind of my first steps into leadership. Although when I think back now, how far that's kind of removed from kind of where I've ended up is quite large. So yeah, started off in that way, then finished uni and went to work in Denbighshire as play development officer and developed some community play schemes there, operating year round, working with a lot of voluntary groups at the time as well. So the way that funding was devolved is some came into local authority and others went directly to groups. So that was a kind of first toe really into the world of community work and kind of real kind of volunteer action. And then from there, I went to work on the Community's First programme in Flintshire, ended up running the Community's First programme in Bringwalio, which is an estate mould. So I had a couple of years there. And then went back really to follow my passion, which was around sports development. And then spent 16 years with the sports development team. But I think that's where the kind of interest in youth work kind of really evolved from. So I'd worked in play work for quite a number of years by then, worked in community development and a lot of community action, consultations, advising plans around, how do we kind of grow kind of communities. A lot of that was based around youth and play work and working with young people at the time. But then within sports development, we were shifted a lot more to a community model, probably similar really to what you see now around sports development. So a lot of clubs being involved, volunteers, working with volunteers. And then in the last probably about 7 years, what was happening within sports development is we were starting to pick up on more social issues. So we were working with partners such as the youth service at the time, police, youth justice, just around issues that were happening. And we really came in as a sports team, a wider sports team from an engagement point of view. So we were using sport as the vehicle to engage with young people.
Yeah.
And then that's where the kind of real shift for me happened into youth work. And then, as I say, since that from that point, really, that kind of whole emphasis, and what really kind of drove me was what at that time was looking what a good community sports deliverer looked like, and the skills that young person or that member of staff would have, and that became kind of multifaceted, and we were a standout really, along with one other county in terms of how we were developing that approach. And then just a seamless link then back over into the local authority. So moved from third sector and back into local authority and took up the role within the youth service.
You picked up on a few things there I'm quite keen to sort of unpack. Did you notice a fundamental difference between local authority and voluntary sector in terms in which not just youth work works, but also the way in which we work with young people? So whether that's more wider? I appreciate they both have their separate sort of challenges as well, but do you notice much of a shift?
Not necessarily. I noticed more of a cultural
Yeah.
shift moving from third sector into local authority in terms of maybe, yeah, potentially where the service was aimed. But I suppose I've been fortunate enough that it was my role really to realign the youth service with where it needed to be. There was, I think, within the third sector, we spent a lot of time developing those partnerships. They were key
Mm,
really to how we were going to develop, how we were going to grow, how we were going to be funded, where our data was coming from. All of those things were driven by this wide range of partners. And I suppose moving into local authority, although some of the partnerships were quite strong, there was also a lot of silos as well. And one of the first things we did was to, readdress that and bring the sector together. So we don't see it as a voluntary and statutory service sector. We just see it
yeah.
as we're all delivering the same things in the same places. And I think that that's really driven by, as a local authority, we can't be all things to all people. We've got, a limited pot of funding, which
Yeah.
may be generous compared to some other areas or, some other services. But actually what we can't do is provide a universal youth service right across the authority. So what we need to do is use that money as smart as we can, but also work with our partners to ensure that there's equity for young people. So that's how we really brought it together, and we took it from that approach from the beginning. So I suppose my time back within local authority has really been driven by how do we work together to get the best outcomes for young people, which is what we're all trying to do. But we have had to, within that, we've had to shift some mindsets because there's
Mm,
different ways of working. It's going back to that finding trust, finding commonalities, and like any partnership, it needs work and service, doesn't it? So we have spent quite a long time or a lot of time invested in developing those relationships.
yeah. But before I go on to Caroline, I just wanted to pick up a few things because you mentioned you worked in play and then sort of sports development as well. And do you think they all sort of complemented each other in terms of and youth work as well? Do you think they all sort of they all had similar sort of value bases, which sort of led you to this sort of position as well?
Yeah, absolutely. With play, I think the way we've moved play along, so I've been involved in play through one way or another, probably through all my career, because even when I was working
Yeah.
within sports development, it's still part of the play sufficiency. We were still
Yeah.
working with our play development team. But when I go back to think about how we used to deliver it, and then we brought the level 2 qualifications in, working with companies like Dynamics at the time, who were based down south. So they were really they were probably ahead of the game, and they were starting to think about play in a different way and professionalizing it. And then the strategies that Play Wales brought in, and you could see the obvious links with sport and how that kind of came in. I think that there is a seamless link, and we use play now. So one of the things that we've done with our play department in the last couple of years is put it onto a 12-month standing. So our
Yeah.
play development team run right throughout the year, which is a big shift from those summer play schemes that used to run. What we've also done is introduce our transition clubs in more areas. So where we've maybe struggled with the youth service provision or numbers have been low, we've dropped that age. We use our play workers to do that engagement. So, and we were already doing that with sport as well. So sport was kind of going across the two main age ranges. And we were
Mm,
finding that the issues that young people were presenting with, they were presenting traditionally with issues around maybe crime, knife
mm,
crime, drugs, vaping. All of those things were coming into our play provision. Those things were
mm,
coming into our sports provision at a younger age. So where we were looking at that kind of rigid, youth work starts at the age of 11, play work was to the age of 12. Those barriers really needed to be challenged. Um,
yeah.
so we use that transitional youth service from about the age of 8 to about 13 before they go in. Because the other thing we're finding as well from our data is that we're finding drop-offs from or up until about the age of 13, 14. So we were thinking that
Yeah.
the traditional youth clubs were not servicing those younger ages. So we spent some time kind of consulting around those areas to see where that link was. Yeah, definitely. And the principles can be, I mean, sport can be two things really. Sport, you can have sport development where
Mm,
it's kind of that traditional um, community participation to club model, which goes on a performance pathway, and there's an absolute place for that. But the one thing that we used it for was sport for development. So, and we, we still do, we still have a very popular, a very expansive community doorstep sports provision, where we work with the likes of street games to be able to develop that. But one thing that we do is we put youth workers into that. So all of the sports coaches that I had and they've carried on within the organisation that I left. So they qualify all of their community coaches in youth work qualifications. So
that's
we're
good.
ensuring that we're growing that provision. The sport is being used for that development. So yeah, just to summarise really, that there is a seamless link, but there's only that link there if you work on it. I think it'd be quite easy not to have it there. So I think again, you need to be mindful of what you're putting in, what the purpose of it is, and what you expect to get from it.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with all of that. And interestingly, I think there's going to be quite a lot of development, especially with play. And I've often worked together with sports development and done the similar thing in terms of upskilling them in getting their level 2 and 3 qualification. I think it's recognizing the value in all services, not just your own as well, isn't it? And I find that fascinating. We had a podcast earlier today around youth homelessness and collaboration being the key driver in the success of youth work, you know. And on that, Caroline, I'll bring you in. You're not the newest PYO anymore. I think you're the second newest now, I believe. So
Woo!
congratulations on your promotion and all that. And you're no longer classed as the newbie PYO. And I always wonder how long you get the newbie title for, because like you could be a newbie for 5 years, but because you're the newest, do you know what I mean? It's
I don't mind
anyway.
keeping it a bit longer. People are kind.
Yeah.
People are kind. More understanding. Yeah, so just a little bit about my background, I guess, for those that don't know me. I've always been involved in youth work in some shape or form, I'd say, from a young age, but probably not really recognising that it was youth work or part of a youth work family or a youth offer. So I started off in like uniformed voluntary organisations myself, really feeling the benefit of being engaged in those kind of opportunities as a young person. And then that led me to gain opportunities to attend like a youth leadership course off the back of achieving my bronze and silver DAV award. And for gold, I offered to, run a voluntary group in my local town because there was nothing for young people. So I set up a DAV group with a friend, not really recognising it as youth work. It's just something I enjoyed, felt passionate about DAV. And then that was put forward for a Youth Work Excellence Award. And off the back of that, they put me on a youth leadership course on a weekend. I didn't really know where I was going, what I was doing, what it involved, but it really set me on my journey for youth work, and really understanding what is youth work and the value base of youth work at a young age. I was probably like 17, 18. I probably just started working as a full-time nursery nurse in my local village, not really thinking youth work was my career. I did want to go into primary school teaching initially. So I always had a kinship for working with children, childcare, young people, but not necessarily youth work, because where I grew up, there wasn't a youth club as such. There was a youth centre attached to a school, and it was a teacher that delivered that youth club. So I associated it very much with school and teaching and formal education, not necessarily youth work. But going on the youth work course, off the back of that, the lady who managed DB at the time said, "Have you ever thought about doing a career in youth work?" I was like, "Oh, didn't even know you could do a career in youth work."
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, I really recommend that you apply." And I'm probably really, university wasn't even on my radar at that point, to be honest. I was quite happy working as a nursery nurse, doing childcare, that's what I wanted to be. Then I was thinking, whole brave new world. I might be able to go to university, I might be able to leave this town, see some bright light. So last minute, I applied to Newey in Wrexham, got an interview with Bert Jones, the infamous Bert Jones. Got approved to go there, but then I also applied for De Montfort in Leicester, and I think just because it was so multicultural, big city, and I'd come from a small town, I was just like, oh yeah, this is good. It's a whole new world. So I went to De Montfort and I did my diploma in youth and community work, got my degree, and had great placements. I joined the soft touch community arts, so I really love community arts. And if there were jobs in community arts, I think I would have ended up that way, because I'd done art foundation as well. So it was like quite artistic, I just like that side. And I went abroad in my second year to Eindhoven in Holland to a dedicated youth provision, which blew my mind, to be honest, because I had a bar, pub, kids are being scanned for knives. And so I was like, oh, from my little village to like wherever I come, this is like a whole new world. They can drink and they can do rock and roll in this youth club. What is this? But, it's all opening my eyes, part of my learning journey. And really did cement, youth work was a career for me. And I also worked in my summer holidays for Newport Youth Service. And so off the back of that, that probably cemented my career because they'd had a taste of my work with young mums doing
Yeah.
detached. And they're like, we want to employ you. And I got an area youth work job in Newport and very quickly went from JNC1 worker to an area worker due to
Wow.
sickness, whatever.
Yeah.
And started there, the information shop in Newport. So when information shops were rife in every town, city, I was instrumental in starting the information shop. Then my dream job of DAV development officer came up in Cardiff Council. You know, that was my entry into youth work. And I was really passionate about DAV. I thought, oh my God, these jobs don't come up very often.
You
I
don't.
feel bad, a bit of a disloyalty, but I'm going to apply. And luckily, really fortunate for me, I got employed by Cardiff Council to do what was, I thought, my dream job, DAV, which I did in the mainstay for 18 years, really growing that service. You know, at its height, there's probably 55 units, 1,500 kids doing DAV at any one time across the city in Cardiff. But due to the, colossal cuts and the decimation of youth services and a different operating model being introduced, sadly, that came to an end. But I've got some of my most beautiful youth work memories, taking kids to Kenya, Australia in that role, absolutely brilliant job. And I still really feel passionate about DAV and what it offers to young people. So alongside that, I ran some inner city youth provisions in posh Pennyland, I'd say, kind of very posh and leafy, to more inner city, more impoverished boroughs such as Butetown.
Yeah.
All completely different, but really embedded in universal youth work. I feel really passionately about universal youth work. Can never get rid of universal youth work. It's a bedrock of youth work as far as I'm concerned. And then I had a proposal, I didn't apply, that I needed to think about applying for targeted role within the service. And I was very hesitant because I was like, oh, targeted youth work, I'm not sure how I feel about that. My heart's in universal youth work. Is it youth work? That whole debate. But anyway, I took the leap of faith, thought it'd give me, more time with my son, my family, all the nights of universal youth clubs, 4 nights a week job. So I thought, okay, come on, brave new world. Let's try managing the post-16 targeted support, which is a real change, a real shift for me. And I was wary, and I can remember the first, meeting the team for the first time. And I was saying, oh, don't you do any like youth work projects? And they're like, no, we do case management. We work one-on-one with young people. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the wider, opportunities? Oh no, this is what we do. And I'm like, oh, so you work with young people. We are informal educators. We could do small group work, big group work. That's youth work, isn't it? And they're like, oh yeah, well, it is youth work. And I'd be like, yeah, well, you're youth workers. And they're like, yes, we are. So I changed the mold of targeted post-16 delivery and really introducing a number of like pioneering projects, I'd say, thinking out of the box to address need in a different way. So our first project was Recipe for Life. Really, if you saw the kids are really dysfunctional, you wouldn't put them together on one course and you wouldn't think you're going to get any successful outcomes at the end, knowing what they were like at the beginning. But they all progressed very relatively quickly in 12 weeks from thinking it's absolutely rubbish to all going into some form of retail. And it just ignited a spark that actually there's different ways to deal, with targeted work within a universal approach, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I felt very passionate about embedding that. So I was there for about a year and a half through dreaded COVID. I started the post and it was COVID, actually, the beginning of COVID. So it was a definite challenge.
Yeah.
I felt really, a passion for targeted youth work. And then I went on to take over grassroots city centre provision in Cardiff, dedicated provision for post-16 young people.
Yeah.
Probably really disaffected, on the fringes, I'd say, that really need that support alongside running targeted youth work. So that was my last mainstay within Cardiff before I took the leap of faith and applied for the service manager job in Blaenau Gwent. And amazingly, they could see the potential and they've taken a pen on me and enabled me to realise an ambition, I suppose, of being service manager in quite a small authority, I'd say. I don't necessarily fit the mould, I'd say, of what people naturally expect as a youth work manager in Blaenau Gwent. But I always say, you've got to be the change. And I know 100%, no matter what, I'm passionate for young people. I'm passionate about youth work. It doesn't matter where you work if you've got that passion for young people, and that's what I want to instill in my leadership and management within Blaenau Gwent. Fundamentally, it's about the young people and giving the best services to young people.
Quite curious
Through
why why you think you don't sort of fit the molds in Blind Gwent. What's in and why you might be different. Obviously we all know the previous PYO,
Yeah.
who's obviously moved on to sort of
Yeah,
more
she's
senior
lovely.
roles
She's
in
my
Blind
direct line
Gwent.
manager, and I'm really fortunate. Yeah, really fortunate to
Yeah,
have her
so
with
I'm
me.
curious to why, yeah, why you said that. And
Well, I just think, imposter syndrome's a lovely thing. I think you question yourself, your ability, whether you're good enough, that doesn't go away. But
yeah,
equally, I am in a minority, I'm not
yeah,
denying that up in
yeah,
Blaenau Gwent, and not many, people from ethnic minority backgrounds, female, black
yeah,
managers that reach, this level of management. I stand out, I do stand out. And, for good or for
yeah, yeah,
bad, I do stand out, But I grew up in a rural white village in rural Wales. So I think, everything within my life, within my job, my career has prepared me for
yeah.
taking this post, even though people might not realise that.
No, 100%. I said, it's a really good way of putting it. You got to be part of the change, and you're there within the sort of thick of it, I suppose, to make that change happen. So that's really, really, really admirable. And I'm quite curious as well that you started working with younger children, and now you sort of, our older children. Obviously, we call them young people. So I suppose in nursery you might be wiping their bums, but obviously in in youth work it's a slightly different approach. And I
Yeah.
wonder how you found that transition, or was it that the nursery thing was a temporary thing and then you found your sort of
I never went into it. I never went into it thinking it was temporary. I just knew I always wanted to work with
yeah,
children. So I think I just got caring nature. I really like people. I'm a people person. I feel I'm really
yeah,
empathetic, and I care. I genuinely care about people, and people, doing the best for people.
yeah,
So I think I was always going to work with people. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
just, if I wasn't going to be a teacher,
yeah,
nursery nurse did fit the bill, but I don't think I'd have ever just stayed there. I don't think I'd have been satisfied just staying there. I was ready. I was ready for something else, and
yeah,
luckily, youth work was that something else. And I
yeah,
have got
no,
absolutely no regrets. I absolutely love youth work. I feel really fortunate. It's been my career. It's been my job. All the opportunities it's provided to me. I wake up and I love going to work. I love going to work. I'm really fortunate. That's what I'd
yeah,
say.
yeah. And I suppose the sector's very lucky to have you and Matt and Emma as well. Like you offer a lot to the sector. So
It's a
so
small community, isn't it? In
it's like a
Wales,
family.
we all know each other end of the day, and we'd all support each other, and that's the beauty of Wales, isn't it, really?
100%. We are, in comparison to our neighbours in England, Scotland, and Greater Ireland, we are very much more connected here in Wales. Whether you're voluntary sector, geographically imbalanced, or whatever, we always know that we can rely on whoever across the sector to support. Yeah. No, thank you for that, Caroline. And I'll move this on to Emma. Emma, you've submitted your doctorate, your
I
PhD, so
yeah,
soon to be Dr. Emma. But for now, it's Emma. But then it will
Miss
be
Emma.
Dr. Miss, yeah, Mrs. Emma. But yeah, no, but you've written. Everyone probably knows who you are because you're like a youth work celebrity, and
Oh, I don't
many
know
people
about
have been
that.
on your courses now. But yeah, give us a flavour because from speaking to you, I know you've had like you're very much invested into youth work sector, and I wonder how you sort of got there in the first place, and and what's led to getting to this point.
Yes, it's really interesting. I've loved during Caroline's and Matt's sort of journey. And Carol and I worked in Blaenau Gwent many years, probably about 22 years ago now. I remember then they were just really cautious, even if you were outside of Blaenau Gwent. And why do you want to come and work here? So it's brilliant that you've got there and you've sort of settled in and you've got the role, that you have. But yeah, for me, I think, if somebody sort of like sliced me in half, I think youth work, I would be like a stick of rock youth it would be there. And I never planned on getting into youth work. I was always a youth club girl. I went to youth club every night. It was a dance for youth events Wales. And it was my safe haven, I guess, when I was growing up because I never went to school. So it's For me, it's really interesting that I've arrived at this place. I worked in a factory packing plastic bottles for probably about 7 years, and I was about 21, and I eventually plucked up my courage to go and speak to my old youth worker, Graham Lewis. Bless him, he's no longer with us, but he's on the front cover of my thesis. He was the one that started me on
That's
this
nice.
journey. And I remember going to speak to him. I said, Graham, you got to help me because I can't be in this factory packing plastic bottles for 20 years. And he said to me, go away and write 500 words for me on something that you're passionate about. And I went away. I watched a film about a young boy who took his own life, and his name was sort of Philip Knight. And I wrote my 500 words on that, and I sent it to him, or give it to him then, as it was. And I didn't have any capital letters and any full stops. And he laughs now every time he sees me. He's going, I wish I'd kept that article, Emma. No capital letters and full stops. I was only probably about 20, 22. So it's really interesting. I never went to school. And if somebody had told me that I would still be studying like 35 years later, I would have said definitely not. So it's quite interesting. But I know Graham, he was youth worker at education. He helped lots of local people, on their journeys into youth work. And yeah, I feel the same as Karen. I've been really lucky, really fortunate. I've been all over the world with youth work, and I've worked in a lot of local authorities as well. That's where I did all my work until probably about 15 years ago, when I went into higher education at the University of South Wales, where I did all my training as a sort of senior lecturer in youth work, and I absolutely loved being in university, loved working with youth work students. It's really passionate. It's the same, your values and principles are the same working with the students. A lot of them don't feel that they did very well in school, and so coming to university is a sort of second chance. And I think I had a real niche for working with students and supporting them, and trying to get them, working with them, same as you would with young people starting where they're at, to get them through their undergraduate degree. And big part of my research now is looking at people's experiences during primary and secondary school, and how that has an impact on the way that they learn, as an adult. That's what my thesis is on, really. But it's talking about people's experiences. I hate it when we look at young people from a sort of deficit perspective, and we don't look at enough of a system around us and look at the inequalities that are there. I think a lot of the blame is put onto young people instead of us looking at the broader system. So that is something I'm sort of still pretty passionate about. So I was in Blaen y Gwent. I did all my training in Rhondda and Taff. And then I went to work for the Children's Society as an advocacy and mediation officer. And that was a really powerful job, a real challenging role, because you are working with young people who are going through really, really tough times. And then I left there just as the Children's Society was withdrawing from Wales due to sort of funding, and I was a single mum and thought, all right, I've got a choice. And then that's when I applied for the job in Blaen y Gwent, and I was their area officer with responsibility for training. But absolutely loved my job in Blaen y Gwent. It's just a lot of travelling when you've got 2 little ones. So I left there and I applied for my first full-time role in Rhondda and Taff, and I went to be an area officer there. So I was there for a little while, and then I left there and went to work in Neathport Talbot, where I went for a 3-month job and was there for 5 years. So absolutely loved working in Neathport Talbot and with all the staff and the young people. And one of my most memorable times there and in Blaen y Gwent actually was in Duke of Edinburgh with the Duke of Edinburgh's award. Carol and I used to coordinator in Blaen y Gwent. And we went to the Celtic Manor with about 40 groups, took some young people from Pennicombe Special School and a group of young people that didn't go to school. And we had such an amazing day. My hair was really frizzy, soaking wet, knees in muck. But we had an amazing time. And the young people, when we got there, they thought, we're never going to win. We're going to lose. We're going to come last out of these 40 groups. And I think we come about 15th. But a big part of my youth work is providing opportunities for young people that they wouldn't always get. And I think sometimes people who are outside don't get that. They think that every young person has a sort of same experience as their children. And for a lot of the
Yeah.
young people that we work with, you know, they don't. So yeah, a real advocate for youth work. I've been working for myself as a sort of consultant and sort of researcher for the last 5 years. I got really interested in leadership when I got my job in Neath Port Talbot. I had, you know, massive responsibility for budget and staff and provision. And I'm thinking, there's no toolkit that comes you as a leader and a manager. You were just in the role and expected to manage it. So I did my master's research in De Montfort University. That's also one of my best experiences because of its diversity. The lecturers, they're the best team ever I've worked with on how they get students to understand the theoretical concepts of youth work. I don't know how they did it so well, but they did. I focus on leadership and what were an old term now, the CPD needs of leaders and managers in Wales. It was about sort of 10, 15 years later that somebody said to me, can we have a look at your thesis? And they had a look at it. And I said, what do you think? And they said the issues you've identified they're still relevant, but much worse now. And I think that's where that's how I've ended up really being really passionate about working with youth work leaders, trying to help them navigate the system and provide and work with them to provide strategies and solutions that, as Matt said in his introduction, increase outcomes for young people. So for me, that's my aim now. I don't do a lot of work unless it's going to make things better for young people, because we know with poverty, the cost of living crisis, post-COVID, you know, violence, young people have got it so tough at the moment. So I'm really passionate about still working with leaders and trying to make a difference really to the lives of young people.
I want to just pick up a few things you said there. One of the things listeners or watchers or viewers, sorry, on this podcast, you mentioned deficit model, and I'd be keen to, what's your take on what a deficit model is? And only because I've heard it in several contexts, and I'm wondering if there's a way that you look at it, and what your take on deficit model is.
Yeah. For me, it's around the language that we use, how we talk about young people and their experiences, how we label them as NEET, not an employment, education or training, without really looking at their experiences and their backgrounds, without fully understanding it. And I'm hoping my thesis and my work is going to really sort of contribute to that. So it's just about I'm trying to raise the just getting us to think about some of the language and terminology that we use. There's a professor in Exeter University, and he is absolutely amazing. I'm trying to think of his name, and he talks a lot about that. And I just think it's a challenge for us. It's about challenging us around the language we use. How is it written in sort of policy documents? I think that's really important, and I think we need, as youth workers, we are the biggest advocates for young people, and just trying to make a difference really into how they're seen in broader society. And I've been really interested. I've been working with heads of schools in Newport recently, and I've been really impressed. They seem to be understanding. They've got a really similar approach into understanding young people's experiences. And I think we can't just do it all. It's coming back to what Matt says about partnerships, collaboration. It's about how can we change that deficit narrative around young people. So for me, that's when I'd like to change the language that we use when we talk about young people and try and understand their lived experiences. I think that's really important, and not just cross them off, not just like write them off and cross them off the list. They can't do anything positive. So for me, I think sometimes they've just had lots of barriers put in their way, and they've been unable to overcome them or manage them or navigate around them. And they've just ended up labelled then with this deficit label that I don't really like. And I would like us to try and change that if we can.
Sometimes it'd be handy to erase things from the dictionary so they wouldn't ever label that in the first place, wouldn't it? But you mentioned about sort of not sort of viewing yourself as academic, you know, and we've spoken before, and you said you're a non-traditional learner and you like to cater for non-traditional learner, but you got to a position from calling yourself not academic to producing a very academic piece of work, some of which academic people will probably never actually do. So that's an achievement in itself. And I wonder what's got you to the point of saying you're not academic to be in, although you won't say yourself you're an academic, but to get to the point where you're writing some very high profile academic literature. So what got you from point A to point B? Because that's massive, that is, isn't it? You said you rarely attend a school and then you're producing a PhD.
To write in paragraphs with no capital letters and full stops,
Yeah.
that sits with me. We put a lot of barriers in our way because of our experiences in school and how we perceived within the family, and I think sometimes that can sort of stop us from achieving the things that we can do. And I work with some people like Kate Haywood in Newport. She is a typical academic. Kate can just write. She can just write in an academic
Yeah.
way and she can do it. I've never, ever been one of those people. I always struggle. I always find writing a real challenge. But I will sit up all night to get something done and get it in. And I think now it's just sort of practice. And I think one of the things that have helped me get through the end, I've had some, when you're a young person and you're having a tough time or you're
Mm.
from quite a complex family, those issues don't go away. You were still navigating them as an
Yeah.
adult. You were still navigating them, even though I'm in my 50s and I'm still navigating quite complex relationships and family environment. So I still get the same barriers. I'm just better at navigating them now. And I know I can call on and I've got more strategies. Like, running is one of my strategies for sort of keeping myself sort of well and taking myself out there. So one of the things that kept me going, I really wanted to tell these students, these young people's, these women's, these men's stories about what they went through when they were growing up. And I've sort of I used a timeline to capture their journeys, which was really, really powerful. And we're all used to dealing and handling disclosures within youth. We're gonna, they're always tough, they're always challenging. And some of my best training that I had to do that was in the Children's Society, working from a real children's rights perspective. I've never had it in a research context. So, you ask participants to participate in your research and they send you their timelines and there's nothing really on there. It's
Mm.
only and I was collecting my data at the start of COVID, and when you sit there and they're talking to you about, how they were abused when they were sort of growing up and how that affected their school journey, or what was it like being neurodiverse and being made to feel, a lot of them told me that they felt as if they were thick and they were stupid. And it was quite shocking, really. And for me, it helped me have a real understanding on how those experiences changed their identity and
Mm.
how they put barriers in their way in regards to learning. And I've got a really good understanding now, I think, of what we can do to support young people to help them navigate through some of their challenges. So capturing people's lived experiences, I think, is really important, because only then we truly understand
Yeah.
how it's impacted upon them. So for me, the last sort of few weeks, Daryl, you've been in quite a few meetings with me. I've gone into meetings where I've not had my hair done. I've had no makeup on. My hair's been just like slashed back.
Did you brush your teeth though?
I have brushed my teeth.
That's the main, yeah. As long as you brush your teeth.
Yeah, that's just how I had to get through. I ended up working all night till 5 o'clock in the morning and then getting up at 8 then to sort of like start work. So it was a pretty intense time over the last sort of
So if you imagine most people, when they're younger, do the sort of 5 o'clock stint because they're out partying. Yours is because you were writing. So it's like your timeline's gone full circle. You've gone back to the 5 o'clock where you go to sleep and for a different reason.
But to be honest, my whole passion was around telling those participants their stories, and I'm really looking forward to coming out and talking to directors of education and school teachers about the experiences. And I'm just starting a piece of research now in Carmarthenshire, but talking to young people about why they aren't going to school. And
Yeah.
then I'm working with leaders in Newport on how we can try and keep young people in school. So I'm hoping that my journey, where it's taken me to now, is, it wasn't planned, it wasn't intended, But leadership is something I'm really passionate about. And Professor Alma Harris, who's based in Cardiff, she chairs Circle, who's a research network in Cardiff Met. She says, and in all her writing, is that good leadership can have through the research she's done, can have the most impact on outcomes for young people. And that's one of the things I guess I'm really keen on doing, is working with leaders to help them increase their outcomes for young people.
Can I pick up on that point and maybe ask a more general question to everyone? And I think that's a really good point. You know, we talk about leadership in the youth work context quite a lot, don't we? And I suppose I'm curious of what that looks like and how does that impact young people? I always think back to this, you know, because I do think the way in which we lead people in youth work is somewhat different. I think we're very, I don't know whether we still do our youth work skills through our leadership lens. I'm curious to hear from Caroline and Matt, you know, what that looks like in this day and age. You know, you guys are on the ground operating as PYOs. What does that look like? And do young people indirectly feel the benefit of your leadership? And does the culture start with you? Or what is it? I suppose, Caroline, I see you nodding there. I wonder if you've got an opinion on that, and then closely followed by Matt.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a question I asked because I worked in Cardiff Met for a number of years, and we used to do post you know postgraduate vivas. And one of the questions we'd ask is, "Are you a leader or are you a manager?"
Yeah.
Whether that's a question I've ever asked myself, I'd always say, "Oh, I'm a leader. I'm definitely one with people on the ground. I never want to be, you do have to manage. You have to manage process. You have to manage finance.
Yeah.
You have to have managerial skill, but it takes leadership to build the culture, be the example around those that they want to see, to be the difference within the services that you operate. And I definitely want to be a visible leader.
Yeah.
And I've always led from the front, saying I wouldn't expect people to do stuff that I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. I couldn't think of anything worse than to be known as that person that sits in the office and only sits in the office and no one really knows me or who I am or what I'm about. So I definitely think managerial processes, systems are so important. It's part of leadership, but it doesn't define me. It's my leadership that's at the forefront in how you build the culture, how you build a sense of team, a sense of respect, a sense of belonging, and
Yeah.
a sense of motivation, and most importantly, impact and being the difference. So yeah, it tickled me because it's one of the questions I'd ask. I've never asked it to myself.
No, and I'm curious to hear from you, Matt, because you've had a diverse sort of career pathway with play and sport, and sport's got a very good leadership mentality, I would say, and something that probably us in youth work can lead from in terms of their leadership, the way they build a team and things like that. Because the only way a team can win is by functioning properly, isn't it? So I wonder if those sort of qualities led into where you are now and what it looks like over in Flintshire. How do you sort of lead? How do you build the culture?
Yeah, so I think that's like you say about building a team. It's really important. Going back to about 2011, I did my level 3 with the Welsh Rugby Union, so I was working as a coach educator at the time, and then for my own professional development, in my level 3, and I did a little bit of work through the regional age grade teams up in North Wales. So that was really interesting because that was really about decision making and fostering leadership within your players. But then at the same time, when I was going through my own ILM qualifications, those concepts, those ways of working were all kind of coming together. So it's about how, at the time where we had the under 13s, 14s, 15s, we were developing leadership within those young people. And these are all lessons that we've taken into youth work and into sports development since. But it's how do we enable those young people to make the right decisions? So what situations, scenarios do we place them in so that they can develop their thinking? And then a big part of that was the ability to be able to make mistakes or to learn from your mistakes in a safe environment. So obviously, we're within a rugby context, we talk about scrum line out, where it's clearly a different type of leadership that you would employ. But
Yeah.
from a general play perspective, you could look at, and that goes back to play as well, really. So playing through managing inappropriate risk. So keeping children away from inappropriate risk, but it's okay to take risk. It's okay to climb that tree and fall off at a reasonably safe height. because how do you know if you can climb the tree or not if you don't try it? And that's what I've done in kind of leadership, really, is allow my staff, especially in its development work, is fairly safe. It's not. I always say to my staff, it's not brain surgery. There's no kind of fatal error in this. As long as we're getting our risk assessments in place and what we do is safe, then
Yeah.
actually, if it's a development project, and this is the way I work with my staff, and it'll come back around to how we work with young people. But if it's a development project, go and try it. We can guide, we can talk about it, but I'm not going to tell you what the answers are, because I might have one way of doing something, but you might have another way of doing something, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that is part of my leadership journey, is that, I've probably pretty early on, but definitely as I get more experience with it, is become a lot more comfortable with how other people manage, see things, do things, and try and understand things from their point of view. But then that's the same with young people, because every young person is differently. And it's about, going back to some of the things that both Emma and Caroline have said about each young person and that we work with, each adult as we work within a leadership perspective, is different. So they will come with different experiences. They will come with different backgrounds. They will have experienced things in different ways. Two people might do exactly the same thing and then feel differently about the outcomes. So it's about trying to understand that as best as possible and reframe that. So the way I
Yeah.
work with staff is that I always say that I will give staff all of the opportunities to develop themselves. So all of my staff go on leadership qualifications. So we start at ILM level 2 and then we work up to level 7. So everybody's on the leadership continuum in some way. So when they're delivering, and this is what I was seeing already a lot with youth work, is that it's looking at that real person-centered approach to that delivery. So we always talk about it within our teams, but we can open the doors for young people, give them the confidence, the motivation, and the opportunity to walk through that door, to do that activity, to progress, to do a qualification, whatever it may be. But we can't ultimately make that final decision. And that's got to be down to that young person, or that's got to be down to that member of staff. But all we can do through our leadership, and this goes through, whether that's play, sport, youth work, is we can create that opportunity and we can create the framework for success. But we can't ultimately decide whether that's successful or not. That comes then down to the individual's leadership to go, I'm going to do that for me because I've got all of those skills, and somebody's enabled me to have those. And I think that's the best analogy I can use with it, really. But that's the approach that we take, and we build in that resilience alongside it, because all the cheesiness about first attempted learning, fail, all those types of things. But there's a great truth in that actually failing is part of your building up your resilience. And I think that, where we don't want young people to fail, but actually failure is not bad, because it means you're pushing your boundaries. And if you're pushing, then you will inevitably fail. Once you fail and you're able to cope with that, then you're building your emotional resilience. And I think that those are things, regardless of where people go in life, whether that's learning a new skill or going into a new job, or, going through hardships later on in life, maybe losing the job or divorce or whatever it may be. It's things that you can fall back on because you've been through all of those experiences. So yeah, hopefully that's how we work with our teams and measure some of those things.
Yeah, I find it really interesting, the sort of discussions around failure. I always use the 4F model. I do. Fail fast, fail forward. That seems to be my sort of way of working things. And I do find it good, and I think I don't think there's any harm in trying either. It's one of those things, isn't it? It's celebrating failure. What film is it? It's a Disney film, Meet the Robinsons. Have you seen that? It is relevant. I'm not just talking about a Disney film, but there's a scene in there that the boy makes an invention and it completely fails. And the family all start going, yay, and all clapping and be happy failure and all this. And he's like a bit startled, like, what's going on? And the family members say, oh, it's good to fail. It's how you, and all their failed inventions are like all on display and stuff like that. So maybe go and watch a kid's film after this and be inspired. But Disney has a weird way of inspiring us sometimes, isn't it, with their inspirational quote?
Yeah, it is interesting you say that. I think when Caroline and I did our training, youth training, leadership, we've always had a sort of like real humanistic approach, but it was still very authoritarian and autocratic. Whereas when you look at leadership now, particularly around, it's changed, it's new, and even more so post-COVID. But if you listen to a lot of like the high performance podcasts or specialists in high performing leaders, whether they're sports personalities or managing massive corporate companies, all of that, and you reach at them, when you listen to them, all of them see now failure as a good thing. They see it as a key part of the leadership journey, as long as you learn from it. I was listening to when I was around one of the Formula One managers, and they had massively lost and something drastically happened. And like you said, it was really expensive. It cost them a lot of time, a lot of money, didn't do their reputation any good. But he said he felt it was positive because them as a team, they learned from it. So failure is only bad if you don't learn from how it failed and what went wrong. And I think as a leader, we're human. We work with people. We work in really complex environments. We aren't going to get everything right. I think what's really important for us as youth leaders is that we can talk about it. Why didn't that go as planned? We
Yeah.
all reflect on our practice, and I think it's good to show that human side to people that you manage and say, look, that doesn't go out as I planned. It didn't work, but I think failure is good as long as we learn from it. And I've put that film on my watch list over Christmas style because I've not seen that one. So I think leadership, it's changed the way we lead, the way we managed. We're much more compassionate now. It's really challenging managing people. We're never ever going to get it. We're never ever going to get it right. But I think we're human. As long as we learn from it, I think it just makes us a better.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Fully agree. One of the things I think back to quotes that previous managers have said to me. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this, and I've written them down as we spoke, just because it started prompting me about when I was a practicing youth worker, and I feel as if that you guys. I'd love for you guys to be my managers. My previous manager was fantastic, and the one before that. But back when I first ever started, you can tell that the evolution of leadership has changed a little bit. One of the quotes I've written down is, "I'm not here to be liked," and I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Are you here to be liked? For me, I'm a colossal extrovert, and I find it a bit strange if someone said they didn't like me, and I try to lead by like kindness and be myself. And if they didn't like that element of me, I'd find it really, I don't know. But that's just a personal thing for me. I appreciate I'm being a bit emotionally, I don't know, vulnerable there. And Caroline, I seen you sort of
I'm
react
laughing
then.
because I've heard that quote. Not here to be a friend, not here to be
Yeah.
liked.
Yeah.
I've heard all of that. Ultimately, I think it's a lot easier to get stuff done and get people on board if they do like you. So although it shouldn't matter, and sometimes I said your Teflon coat, I said it grows with every year, and the experiences that you gain along the way, particularly with people management. None of us are perfect.
No.
None of us are infallible. We will make mistakes, but it's only those mistakes and showing that you're human. I think that endears people to you. So, although you're not there to be, in a friendship capacity, it is much easier to be liked and to take people on your journey and vision, with you collectively, let them feel, they've got voices, they've got an active role, they've got an active place, but everyone's valued, everyone's voice is equally as important. It makes your life easier, I'd say, to be
Yeah.
liked rather
Yeah.
than go in from the position of I don't care if any of you don't like me. I don't think that's very positive.
Well, that's
really.
validated my theory then. Thank you. I don't know. Do you have a similar sort of aspect to that, Matt? Or
Yeah, I very much see my role or leader's role as in enabling your staff to grow, really. So I try and give all my staff the limelight, the opportunity to thrive, create environments for them where they can be successful. Consider how they feel. I'd like to think that we manage with kindness, we manage with fairness, we manage with openness. There's two ways to that because obviously we're employed by a by a local authority in this respect. But I think we're flexible. We're flexible in our approach, but at times we need to be able to ask for that flexibility back. But I think we're honest with that, and I think that the culture is it should be safe, and we all buy into that. In terms of the light, I don't think it's not a popularity contest, but I think that, if you look after and you genuinely care about your staff, you'll get that back most of the time. 99% of the time, you'll get that back. I think with there are the exceptions, and that exception would be, individuals who maybe struggle with the concept of being led in that way, maybe people who don't want to develop, maybe, and that's down to other people's insecurities, and that's again what you've got to work with. But I would say that, most people or leaders now are more like, let's create positive environments where people can thrive. And I think having that, if people are in a good place mentally, if you've got negativity or negative thoughts about line managers or, supervisors or people, colleagues, I don't think that's conducive to a good workplace or getting the best out of yourself. So I think it's being mindful of that as well.
Yeah, it's a useful discussion, this, isn't it? And obviously today's topic is around leadership, and I feel as if from listening to this, this would give me a lot of advice to how to lead a team. And I suppose from my perspective, one of the things I've tried to do is to listen to people, especially those who have done the job, and then make your own sort of decisions up. And I wonder if someone was listening to this, is there any advice that you would give to them? So we said things like we're sort of dispelling the sort of not here to be like sort of rhetoric, but I wonder if there's anything specific that you have learned that might be helpful for those aspiring leaders or those maybe new into a leadership role. Obviously, leadership could be, you could be leading a youth club, for instance, or you could be leading a massive service area. But I wonder what advice would you give, or maybe to your younger self? And I'll start with you, Matt, if that's okay, and then to Emma, because Emma's just seen you went to jump in there.
I think the big one for me would be to find your connections. And I think, Caroline said at the very beginning that, she talked about imposter syndrome. And I think that is, that's really relevant because we probably all
Yeah.
feel it. And I think it's only when you start opening up about those things and saying that, this is how you feel. And, I remember starting in senior manager role within this role and thinking it's pretty isolating because nobody else does this role. There's nobody that you can just sit next to and talk about the things that you're going through, and building that network around you, which takes a little bit of time. And I don't think necessarily, it depends how you form relationships. I think some people form them really well, and this becomes individual as well, is that, it's being mindful of yourself. Some of the best advice I've had is just check in with yourself every day, how you're feeling. And I think you can do that in a work perspective as well. So, how are you feeling about work? What is it that we need to do? What are the barriers? So just understanding how you feel and accept that it's okay to feel the way you feel. So if you're feeling frustrated, lonely, whatever it may be, reach out, start to create that network around you. And there's, I remember how kind the people were in the, with the principal youth officers when I first started. And I think over time, where those relationships build, you kind of have naturally people who you trust a little bit more or people who you talk to a little bit more. And I think that becomes, really key to kind of taking things on board. And then the other thing is just to not beat yourself up when you make a mistake, just accept as a leader, you're creating opportunities for people to, potentially fail and grow and develop. And as you get more senior within your roles, you may feel you get less of that support yourself. So you have to kind of lead yourself through some of those processes. So I think it's when you make a mistake, just kind of be brave enough to go, well, actually, that wasn't quite right. Or, yeah, I'm not going to do it that way again. And I suppose, like, Darryl, what you just said is like, show some of that vulnerability because we're all human. We're all trying to do the best we can within the circumstances that we've got. So I think just be kind to yourself would be kind to yourself. Find your find your critical friends, find your good friends, find the people you can lean on, and some of those conversations may be different. We use our regional meetings sometimes just to have a good moan because we've got no one else to have that really good moan to. But actually, then we get a lot of work done after that. So it's become quite a safe space for us. So it's those little networks, it's those connections which massively help and help you develop.
Yeah, I like that you sort of, I love the term friends as well in the work capacity. I think it's such an inviting term, isn't it? To say you've got friends. Yeah. I just love that way of thinking of things.
I think that's a real old style of leadership. And I think from a youth work perspective, from a lot of the leaders that I work with, I've been teaching leaders on a level 4 course this week. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to get, their perspectives. For many of them, they're just starting out. They're having some real challenges. And being in a leadership role, it is challenging. It isn't easy. You're working in the competitive environment. You're making tough decisions sometimes in quite challenging situations. And I remember I was having quite a challenging time. We were going through a big review, big restructure. They were absolutely scrutinising every aspect of our work. It was underneath the talent. I remember an older manager came and talked to me, and he was going, "We know it's tough, we know it's challenges, but just remember that being in a leadership position is a real privilege. Not everyone gets there. And this is where you can actually inform and lead change." And
Mm,
I remember I had to do a big presentation to the chief exec in a real formal environment and in front of every leader, police, fire service, everyone. Darryl Williams was my strategic manager. I was operation, he was strategic, and his wife went into labour on the morning of a presentation. I had to go on my own. And, and one of the things I was going, just remember, leadership is a privilege and you've got chance to make. So I was like just saying, all back to myself. It was really interesting. I've worked with some amazing leaders in youth work. I've worked with some amazing leaders in the university and higher education sector. One of my best managers, I think he's really brought me on, is Dr. Andrew Thompson. He works with leaders from all over the world, prime ministers. He's a real inspirational guy, and I've learned a lot from him as well. I remember him, I was getting like quite stressed and quite anxious, and he said, "Emma, no one is going to die from the decisions that you make as a leader. No one is going to die. So you just need to just be yourself." And for me, I remember that as well. I do a lot with leaders around leaders' well-being. Some of the advice I would give to myself was, you don't have to be there at the start and the end of the day. You want to, you be have a good reputation. You want to be seen as you can get things done, and you want to be there to support. But sometimes, it's about having your own barriers to get your own work done as part of sort of looking after yourself. And so I think that's a real challenge. I think it's a challenge, when I see new leaders now when they've got new jobs and their children are ill. And I just say to them, family is important. You're a good role model. And I said, just go home. Just go and pick the little one up from school. It's not when you can always catch up on your work later. So
yeah,
I was always quite hard on myself in regards to that. I didn't want to be seen to be sort of taking liberties and all of that. But
yeah,
sometimes I think that was to the detriment of my family. And I think the culture around leadership has changed now. I think it's positive to show that you're human, that you have got to put your family in that first as well. So it's just reminding leaders to just try and achieve a bit of a balance in regards to their well-being. But yeah, some very interesting journeys, but that's what I would tell myself. You don't have to be there at the start and at the end. Try and have a bit more of a work-life balance, because when you have got more of a work-life balance, you do think much more systematically, you are much clearer, and you're not burning the candle at both ends. For me, I think that's a real challenge. I know I've got some critical friends within the sector, and I hope I'm a critical friend to some of the leaders and managers within the sector. And we have those open and honest, conversations when budgets are tough, when asset inspections are challenging, all of those things. So I just think we've got to remember we're in a new environment. Leadership is different. We're not that authoritarian, autocratic sort of leader now. We're much more compassionate, and I think that, as Matt said, just being compassionate to ourselves as well, I think is really important.
yeah, yeah. I fully agree with all of that, and yeah, Caroline, I don't know, you probably got similar thoughts to Mads and Emma, really, but
Yeah, a lot of it, resonates with me, to be honest. A lot of those points, I feel the same about. I just think, you've got to find the joy in
yeah,
every day, because you spend so much time in work. I agree with Matt. You've got to find your circles of support, to ensure you're okay. Work's not everything. Work-life balance is really important, but also your own self-belief. You're not defined by what people think about you or what people think you're capable of. You've got to believe in your own capabilities and drive on. Sometimes, you feel quite compartmentalized. You've done a certain role for so long. Sometimes you might be scared to step out of that or try something different. So some of it's about being brave and taking the leap of faith with things. If I listen to some of the things I've heard, or my limitations, I might never have gone anywhere. So I just think, keep your own self belief about yourself, but most importantly, keep the passion, the motivation, and be kind to yourself and to others,
keep the
and it makes every
passion.
day a bit easier.
keep the passion, be kind, and self-belief seems to be a running theme here. I'm conscious of time, and I've kept you all for a long time, and I appreciate that. But I need to ask you two questions, and they can be pretty quick fire. I ask them to every person that comes onto the podcast, and I don't tend to prepare people for these questions. The first one's negative, I'll be honest with you, and the second one we sort of end on a positive. First one being what you scared about for the future. What scares you, and that could be you personally, or you in this role, or for the wider sector. What scares you? I'm going to go to you, Ed, first, if that's okay. What scares you?
Darryl, did you have to come to me first? I was like having a nice sort of reflect on it. I think
Sorry.
I was really scared about not submitting my PhD
Yeah.
and being a failure. And I was very anxious and I had a lot of anxiety around that. And I used to do a lot of work with women and women in leadership in the communities many years ago. And I used to say to them, just pick something that you think you never ever do. Just pick something. And for many, it was running a K. For some, it was walking up Pen y Fan or something. And for me, it was getting my thesis in. That was my biggest ever challenge. I think, I've worked for myself all during COVID and to walking away from a real, well-paid job in the universities. The only thing I'm sort of scared of at the moment, I guess, is around the forthcoming elections, and whatever leaders sort of get in is that
Yeah.
they won't have the same values of youth work and what youth work brings to young people. So I am personally, I think I've had the whole kit and caboodle thrown at me over the last 5 years. I think I'm fine with that. Bring it on. The forthcoming elections, I'm quite scared about whatever this new government and what party gets in and the impact that can have on youth. Because in Wales, I think we are really lucky. We've still got some challenges to win, but the government seem to really value youth work and what we're doing. And we've got our new body coming up. So that's it for me, really, for now.
Thank you. Matt, what scares you?
Yeah, just had a quick thing. I think it's the annual funding and the kind of slide that we seem to be on, where funding seems to get less and less, and we're always going through trying to find cuts. And I think the one thing for me is that that not struggle with it so much, but I find that that's one of the most difficult things, because I never feel like we're kind of on the front foot, being proactive and really looking. So even if that situation is, it's 25% less funding, well, we can deal with that because we know what it is, which means we can go to a more medium to long-term plan and really start to build systems around what we've got so we can affect change. Whereas I think if we're always kind of looking for that next little cut, then we're not as proactive as we could be. And I think that's going to be the thing that is going to be the biggest, not necessarily stop us from achieving our ambitions, but it's going to be the biggest limitation or the biggest barrier to achieving our ambitions. And I think that that's what we really need to challenge. And it goes back to a little bit about what Emma was saying about the government and how the government's going to change and how that looks. And I just think that, we just need to move towards just a more proactive approach to how we're dealing with things, even if that message is, there's less funding or it's not as great, because we can deal with it from there. And I think it's the not knowing and then the time that it takes to go through those processes. And I think that, that does scare me, because every year we go through, scrutinies, committees, papers to kind of either justify our service or to justify the size of the cuts that we're going through. And I think that's so time consuming, and that time could be used elsewhere. And I think we need, we just need that shift of focus. It doesn't change the actual situation, but it just shifts the mindset. And it moves us then into, we're going to get ahead of it instead of always being behind it. And I think for me, that would really change the narrative, and it would change some of those outcomes.
100%. Caroline?
Again, all those comments resonate, I suppose. I think, what scares me in terms of youth work is the instability
Yeah.
through funding, changing potentially of political parties. It's really worrying. We've seen youth work decimated, over the years. England's probably even worse than Wales. And, they've got new youth work strategy in England, putting money back into the system, a system that was really, prosperous and buoyant and full of, qualified youth workers and great centres decimated, So it's really hard to get that back when it's gone. So, we all are asked to do more with less continually, but it's people and it's people's lives. That's scary, that scares me. You talk about human lives, human
Yeah.
beings, families, etc. So the instability, really does scare me, just because it's so hard to get it back once it's gone.
100%, 100%. Now, let's spin this around to a positive now.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
we've had
That's
that bleak
Daryl.
picture now of the upcoming elections, and if those who are 16 plus, I urge you to go out and vote and do the right thing. But what excites you about the future? What's there to look forward to? I'll go back to you, Caroline, if that's okay, because I started with Emma. But what excites you about the future? What are we most looking forward
I
to?
think the unknown. I don't want my future to be completely mapped out. If you asked my 16-year-old self, would I be here now? Absolutely not. The unknown is exciting.
Yeah,
You're only limited by your own limitations. So, self-belief, try. If you fail, you fail. Die trying, I always say. And that's why I always say to people I work with, I'd rather you try. I don't care if it
yeah.
doesn't work. You've tried, you've been innovative, you've done something new. And that's brilliant. That's great. So I feel like the unknown of the future is great, because that's full of opportunity and excitement for me.
Wow, I mean that's a quotable thing that like you have LinkedIn posts. That is something that we're going to see on LinkedIn. I'm telling you now, that is a very good quote. So yeah, like that. Matt.
Yeah, I think the young people are the thing that I think we can draw so much inspiration from. So we recently had our Youth Achievement Awards, where the bulk of them were our DAV participants who
Great.
completed various levels. But our silver young leaders actually did a presentation. Now, one of them admitted that just after COVID, she couldn't even leave the house to go and get a cheeseburger from McDonald's. And then, as part of her expedition, she went to Thailand on her own. And you think
Wow.
these are these are young people who we facilitate those opportunities. We've had young people progress through snow camp where they've gone to the Alps to train to be ski instructors. They didn't even know how to ski. They'd never dreamed of going skiing prior to the interventions that we'd put in. We've got so many examples of these things, and this is what youth work provides. This is what youth work does, and I think that the staff excite me because they're on board with it, they're pushing it, but the young people who just take up all of these opportunities, just they're inspirational. They're ahead of where we were when we were that age, and they're going to be our future youth workers and our future leaders. So I'm just I'm excited for them. I'm excited for their opportunities, but I'm excited for what they will bring, because one of the things I always say is that young people will model what they've had. So if they've had youth work, they've invested time in them, they will
Yeah.
invest time. So if that's teachers or whatever it will be, they will invest that time back. So that the time that we stop caring or a generation stops caring, well, where is that learned behavior below it? So I see now that this will just be a big, it'll just carry on and it'll carry on. And, there is so many opportunities for young people to come. So, and they will be our future adults and leaders.
Another quotable reference there, Matt. I mean, both of you are coming up with them today. That's brilliant. We're going to have to get some LinkedIn posts ready to rock and roll with that. So fair play to you. You've got to try and top that now.
I can't follow that. The only thing I can relate to, I was retired last week. I've just returned as chair of Youth Cymru. I went back for my first sort of meeting with all the board of trustees. We had our AGM, we had midnight skate. So I knew, and for the chief execs and all the staff, it's real challenging. But I can tell you, that you've picked the right career, because what a weekend, and as Matt said, I just felt so happy and inspired. Friday night, we had 350 young people all travelling to Cardiff, all skating, just simply, having fun. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. We had some pilot lighters join us it was like being in Dragon's Den. Some pilot lighters are working with us to try and make us more sustainable. So for me, that was the start of it. And then we had our annual general meeting the next day, and we had some young people come at the end and speak to us. And you think some of these things that we do, they may seem really, really small to us. Taking them on a little youth exchange, just somewhere local, somewhere small. But to see how these young people, how they grow, how they develop, how they go to a meeting then in Northern Ireland with a group of young people who have had much more experience than them. And then the young people that we're working with, they take over the session. They are leading, they are challenging. And one of them did our young leaders qualification, Caroline, very similar to you. And she was talking about, same as what you said, Matt, there. She didn't have a lot of confidence. She, post-COVID, she really, really struggled. And you always know how old you are, don't you? Because the young people look even younger. And she's enrolled just through coming back into that level 2 qualification workers. And I don't do face-to-face with Youth Cymru. I'm just there supporting the staff and the chairs. And they're actually enrolled in university. They go into university next September. So I think listening to Caroline and Matt, and I remember when I was in Blaen y Gwent and it was Youth Week, and we had all these, we had a big, I can't even remember where it was now, but I just feel youth work is opening doors to opportunity
Yeah.
for young people. Sometimes we forget, even though for us it's only small, for some of these young people it's just opening the doors to a much bigger sort of journey. And I think, yeah, it's when you come home from work happy, yeah, I think for me it's still inspirational and yeah, very exciting, because you don't know where, one thing I say, you don't know where youth work will take you. You just don't. It just opens the doors to opportunity. So for me, I still find that exciting and inspiring and just fills me with joy, the same as what Matt and Caroline says, really.
So there we are. I think we've solved all of life's problems or Youthwork's problems in an hour and 22 minutes. So no, thank you guys. And, thank you to, Caroline, Matt and Emma for joining us. And I think it's been a real eye opener in terms of what leadership looks like in the Youthwork sector in Wales. And we are going to do another leadership episode with the voluntary sector where Emma will join us again for that. So yeah, it'd be good to see if there's any differences between the two, and maybe we'll do a joint one day in the new year. Yeah. So for anyone who's watching this or listening, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. One of the biggest things we want to try and do is to offer live stream events, and to do that we need to grow our subscriber and follower base. So if you're listening, please, if you're a manager or a service manager in your area, get your staff to do the same. It would be massively appreciated, and hopefully we can offer more live stream content in the future. That's our next goal. So thank you for watching. This has been Youthwork, and we'll probably see you next time. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.